Okay, we'll get started with this morning's agenda. First item on the agenda is a motion. Jacqueline Rodriguez. Yeah. Second? All in favor, carried. Thank you. All right, first item on the agenda is application A 2018-57. That's 901 Pebble Creek. Anyone here in support or opposition, come forward, please. Come down to the mic here. Okay, your name?
Alvin.
All right, Alvin. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report? They're recommending approval with condition.
Just want to extend the home, just for some more space.
Any questions, comments? It's a fairly straightforward application. Any questions, comments from colleagues?
Mr. Chair, this is fairly straightforward. The only condition is that the applicant obtain a building permit, so I will move that this be approved as per the staff report.
Second? Sure.
I appreciate there's no one here in opposition, and I see that there's an increased setback from what's required on the side of the property that abuts the adjacent dwelling. It's 1.3 meters is at the closest point, but as it gets to the rear of the building, including the addition, there's a greater increased setback. What is that setback?
Sorry, I just didn't understand.
Well, I'm looking at your site plan.
Yeah.
And the proposed addition is marked here as having a width of 31.4 meters by 11 meters. And then if you follow the side of the property towards the front, you see a side yard setback delineation of 1.3 meters. Perhaps staff can help. I don't know. I just want to know what that setback is to the side yard, the increase when it's stepped back to the
1.1 at the front and 1.3 at the back.
But it's much further when you get to the addition.
Let's see.
I'm not understanding the question.
This distance here.
But we always go with what the minimum is. So the minimum is 1.3.
But it's the proposal is to set it back, and I appreciate that it's being set back. I think that that's helpful. So I'd like to tie it to the site.
I need to get a scale ruler because I don't know
Okay.
the distance unless the applicant knows.
Well, Mr. Chair, my point is that I appreciate that this is being stepped back. I think that makes it shows greater sensitivity to the adjacent property because that is a fairly extensive addition into the rear yard. And I would like to consider tying them to that setback for the extent of the proposed addition.
From here, where you're building your addition, what is that distance from the property line to there?
40 feet, so I got this.
Well, we need to know a distance, like an actual distance. What was it, 20 feet?
No, 30 feet.
30 feet.
I just want 30.
Mr. Chair, the applicants indicated that it's 30 feet, but I mean, without doing an accurate measurement, I don't have that information.
Mr. Chair, through you, I think when an application comes before us, we need to have the full details of what's being proposed in terms of the height, the sketches, the setbacks, and in some instances, it's appropriate to tie in my opinion, it's appropriate to tie the proposal to those sketches. So I'm not sure what to say here other than there's nothing to say that they can't build something other than what's shown in this drawing to a 1.3 meter side yard setback. So I would move that this application be deferred pending full sketches and drawings that are accurately depicting what's being proposed.
Like our agent was supposed to be here with us, but he fortunately couldn't make it. He usually has most of the plans and everything. So, Alec.
How about if we just refer or attach this plan, just say in accordance with the attached plan? And opposed to deferring it.
I don't know how, but it's not to scale, and it's not, that distance is
No,
not.
there is a scale shown on it. It's just that we don't have the mechanism right now to measure it. You'll see a site plan, you'll see a scale at the bottom, 3/32 to 1 foot.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if staff would see that as being sufficiently detailed to ensure that that the building is constructed in accordance with the site plan, then that would satisfy me.
Okay, so you want to amend the yes, Bob?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I might be able to shed a little bit of light on this. We have the overall width of the property. We know that the building is supposed to be 7.5 meters, and the right-hand side yard setback is 4.8 meters. So just adding some things up, let me just give me a second. That would be the side yard setback where the indent comes in, based on math, would be 2.7 meters overall.
So 2.7 plus 1.3 would be the setback at the furthest extent back?
No, it'd be the 2.7 minus the 1.3, so that would be, the little indent would be 1.4 meters.
Oh, so 2.7 is the full setback at the
Yes.
rear? Okay, thank you. That, if we can add a condition that be the setback for the addition.
All right, amend the motion accordingly.
I'll accept that, Mr. Chair.
So amended. So, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're done. Next applications, A 2018-58, 352 Maple Ave. Support or opposition, come forward, please. Good morning. Your name?
Jim Whitmer.
Straightforward application. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report recommending approval with one condition? It's a building permit condition. Questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have some questions. I would just like to get an overview of what this application is about, what's existing and what's being proposed, and where the setback is being measured from.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the site is being converted to self-service storage from warehousing, and it used to be a former meat packing plant. The building that is the subject of the minor variance is a standalone building on what is defined now as the rear of the property. It used to be a side yard. When the application went through severance and consent, it wasn't picked up as being a rear yard setback because the side yard would have been 1.2 meters, and the existing setback for that building is 6.88. What we're doing is asking for a 3-meter setback to allow us the opportunity to develop the site further in the future, which is probably in January, February of next year when we have another application coming in.
So you want the applicant wants a 3-meter setback along the rear line for a future development application that we don't have before us?
That's correct.
I have trouble understanding how we're supposed to assess the impacts of that when we don't actually have a drawing of a building that's going to have this setback. I think this application is premature, and I would move that it be deferred until appropriate drawings are attached or are presented with it.
Staff wrote a recommendation for approval with conditions. We will let him address that for you.
The application will be subject to site plan approval, so it would have to conform with whatever variance would be granted. Failing that, it would have to come back to the Committee of Adjustment or for subsequent approvals. I do see the file planner is in the room. I don't know if he has any additional background information. If through you, Mr. Chair, if you want additional information, he is here that could speak to it.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I could clarify one component that is causing us to change, or when the site was, the original site before it was severed, shared services, which included stormwater management. In that shared service, there's a large swim pond in the middle of the site, which we obviously can't build on. And in order to be able to develop the site as much as we can, we need to move the buildings outside of that. The original plan that the owner had was right in the middle of the pond. We need to skirt that, and having a 3-meter setback on the rear property line will allow us to develop the site as somewhat envisioned, and still meet our requirements that the city has regarding stormwater management and grading and drainage.
Of which case is dealt through site plan control in any event, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that would be managed through site plan control.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe there is a motion on the floor.
To defer?
I will not second that motion.
You're not going to second? All right. Neither will I. So, that being the case, are you prepared to make a motion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I'm prepared to make a motion. If I recall correctly, there have been numerous circumstances where we have approved side yard and rear yard setbacks without a full, complete site plan approved process. So I don't see this as any different than many others that we have addressed. So, Mr. Chair, I will move that this be approved with the one condition of getting a building permit.
Okay, second?
I won't second that motion. Again, my concern is not that it hasn't gone through site plan. My concern is that they're asking for a setback for a future building. We don't know what that building looks like. It's like asking for a 3-meter setback on any of the properties in this area for some future development that we have no concept of what it's going to look like and what the impacts of that are. I think that's very dangerous to be approving variances without an attached application. So I won't second the motion.
All right, I'll second that motion. Carried. Thank you. Second on the basis that, just for clarification, the basis is going to be dealt with properly through site plan control. Thanks. Next application is a 2018-59, 39 Susan Crescent. Support or opposition? Come forward, please.
Hi.
Good morning. Your name? Your name?
Oh, Anita Kandawal?
All right, Anita. If you had an opportunity to review staff's report,
Yes.
they're recommending approval with conditions. You notice part of the conditions are a requirement for you to remove any of the encroachments.
Correct.
So you don't have a problem with that, and you acknowledge that?
Yes.
All right. Any questions or comments?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. It talks about removing encroachments. I'm just curious what those encroachments are.
The encroachments are a shed and my place set.
Oh, okay. As shown in this photo in the staff report?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
For you, Mr. Chair, if I understand correctly, the encroachment is into Lackner Woods, which is at the rear of the property.
Mm-hmm.
This was approved back in 2012 and has never been completed, and the applicant is asking for a renewal of, I guess it was an approval, but they have to get the stuff off of Lackner Woods. So, subject to the applicant removing their effects as indicated in the staff report and getting a building permit, I think this should move ahead. So I will move that this be approved with the conditions as in the staff report.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is 2018-60 at 6 Water Willow Crescent. Anyone support or opposition, come forward, please.
Through you, the chair, I just wanted to make a quick note that the street suffix is a court, just for the minutes purposes. The street suffix is a court for minute purposes, not crescent. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry, I-
Gotcha. It's a court. The notice says Crescent, so I was reading off the notice. All right, your name?
Good morning. My name is Biliana.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Sorry?
Have you had an opportunity to review staff report? They're recommending refusal on the rear yard, and on the other variances, they're recommending approval. Would you like to address, I guess, your report, your application?
The only thing regarding the part of the application that is refused, I just wanted to know, is it the final decision or?
That's recommendation by staff. This committee has the opportunity to make final decisions. So it's our consideration is written here, but it's not to say that that's what we have to approve. So if you want to speak to why it should be approved opposed to being refused, then we're willing to hear that from you. So, and actually, maybe in fairness to yourself, maybe we'll hear from staff first as to why they're refusing it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff have reviewed the application. The setback reductions contemplated here are not unusual for the Committee of Adjustment to consider. What staff has had some difficulty with is that the proposal is to enable the addition, an addition to the structure, which would result in a duplexing of the site. Having looked at the property, the staff person that wrote the report has strong opinions about that this is an overbuild for the site because it would obstruct any rear yard amenity area of the adjacent property. And staff felt that it was perhaps an overbuild for this particular site. Not that duplexing isn't permitted, because it is permitted in the zone. This site is just not conducive from staff's perspective. If you look at the photograph showing the rear yard, it really it is on the, I would say it's one of the on the second page. You can see how close it would be to the adjacent rear yard of the neighboring property. And there's another one showing where the existing play set is. It paints the picture in terms of how close this duplex dwelling would be to somebody else's rear yard.
All right, so that's the reasoning behind staff's report. Would you like to address that further? No? Right, any questions or comments?
Just to make sure I understand it correctly, Mr. Chair, the refusal on, or the proposed refusal on the rear yard setback is because of the impact on the adjacent neighbors?
Correct.
That's a little unusual. Does staff have any alternative recommendations to what the applicant can do?
I think one of the considerations would be if it's possible to do just a one-story addition. Because it's a full two-story addition, that was what raised the concern with the staff member. And I mean, the intent, from what I understand, for the applicant is that they're proposing to duplex the property. So I don't know whether a one-story addition is something that is considered. I myself have had no communication with the applicant because I'm just coming to the meeting here for you. And the other variances staff had no issue with because they were just legalizing existing conditions.
So again, if I understand it correctly, variants 2 through 5 are really quite simple, just legalizing existing conditions. I'm assuming that the adjacent neighbors had been informed of this application as per the
Yes.
regulations, and there's no one here in opposition to it. So, Mr. Chair, I'm kind of inclined to approve variance number 1, subject to your comments or the comments from this board.
I'm inclined to take the recommendation of staff on this one. I can see the concern. There's a significantly reduced rear yard setback. It's going to be overbearing on the property, the adjacent property, and on the property at 118 Willow Court Crescent. Willow Court, I guess it is. So I'm not going to support Mr. McCall's motion on this. I'm not sure if he actually made a motion, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I don't think he quite made a motion either. I have to kind of concur with staff as well. Given the fact that it's a two-story addition, it's going to dwarf the surrounding properties, and also if it's a duplex, it becomes a lack of an amenity space, I think, on the site as well, because you are going to have two separate family units living on this site opposed to one. So I think that's another further consideration.
Okay, Mr. Chair, can we break this into two portions? Variances 2 through 5 is number 1, or as the second one, and a separate variance on the rear yard.
Yeah, that's the way it's written right now.
Oh, okay. But I think we need to take two separate votes on that, because I'm totally in support of approving the variances 2 through 5. I'm not in support of refusing variance 1. So with the blessings of the chair, can we...
We're going to end up in the same place anyways, Bob. But
yeah, I know.
That's
just
fine.
procedurally.
So we'll do you're making a motion then to approve 2 through 5. Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Second, in favor, carried. Now you're making a motion to approve variance number 1. Is that correct?
That's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a second? No, and I can't second that either. Do I have another?
Motion to refuse variance 1.
Yes, I'll second that. Deny, carried. Okay, thank you. Next application is A 2018-61. It's 1 Adams Street. Anyone support or opposition, come forward, please. Good morning, your name?
Good morning. Kevin Muir, GSB Group.
Okay, Kevin, have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
have.
They're recommending approval without conditions. Is there any questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, can maybe you bring me up to speed what a de facto severance is?
Do you have a day? No, just kidding. When you register a plan of condominium, you are also creating a parcel. And probably Jennifer could explain it a little better than I could, however, because Condominium Act is not my specialty, however. And in so doing, you are creating another lot. And because this site has been developed in stages of condominiums, basically the last portion here is going to be and will eventually be its own entity. What is being proposed right now is that they advance the creation of that lot prior to the full site being phased out, and in so doing, they need access, and they don't have frontage on a road. So that's what the variance is that they're seeking right now. In the fullness of time, it would have ended up this way, anyways, because of the Condominium Act. It's another way of creating parcels of land. Aside from severances and plans of subdivision.
Thank you. I think this is the first one I've seen where this has happened. And it was just my something new. Didn't know there was such a thing as a de facto severance via the Condominium Act. I guess I need to do some reading.
It's an interpretation of a section of the Condominium Act, from what I understand, so I don't know that everyone is as aware of it, but yes.
And there's no opposition to this, so I'm in support of this moving ahead, Mr. Chair. So I'll move that this be approved as per no conditions.
Second?
Sorry to drag this on, but I'm hoping, I would just like to have an overview of the project and what this application, just for the purposes of the hearing, I'd just like to get a bit more of an understanding of what the application is about.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. This project has, Victoria Common Project's been underway for the better part of the last 10 years now. It's gone through largely every Planning Act approval process to date, from official plan to zoning to site plan to subdivision. Number of variances and potentially a consent down the road. This is largely just addressing a technicality, essentially, in the bylaw. Everything you see on the aerial on page 1, essentially, is developed. It's subject to a site plan approval. All the roads are in place. All the services are in place. All the easements across the entirety of the property is in place. The portion in red, essentially, the western portion of that red boundary, essentially, are not subject to site plan approval. Those are 3 multi-rise, medium-rise buildings that were left out of the site plan approval, essentially to test the market to see what the ultimate height would be for those sites. So that's all that's required for those portions. There is a provision in the zoning bylaw that does speak to essentially as registration of condominiums take place, they don't essentially create new lot lines, and it's essentially for this purposes. There's a difference of opinion with staff in terms of the application of that. So this essentially is just the easiest way to clean this up, to essentially allow the second building along St. Ledger to proceed to register and then move forward with the ultimate approvals for the last 3 buildings.
Thank you. I appreciate the summary. I am happy to second your motion, Mr. McCall.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is A 2018-62. Anyone support or opposition, come forward, please.
Good morning.
Good morning, Tony.
My name is Tony Bocchino, in support.
If you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes.
Notice they're recommending approval with conditions. There's also a GRCA condition as well to add to that. Is there any questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The applicant, I'm not sure what your relationship is with this. If you're a developer or planner?
Consultant.
Consultant, all right. Mr. Chair, a question for staff then. I'm just wondering how this proposed lot, the two new created lots that would result from the severance, how they compare to other lots of record in the neighborhood. Are they sort of on the smaller end of things? Are there lots of other lots? Is this going to be set a precedent?
The application is for a variance, not for creation of a lot.
Okay, I'm on the wrong application.
It's 330 Joseph Sherg Crescent, application 218062.
No problem.
Mr. Chair, if I can just jump in for a minute, just to clarify it for myself, we have two different, I'm going to say they're surveys, but it says it's not a plan of survey. The first one showing the location of the building and the proposed addition, and at the bottom of that it has limit of development, and I'm guessing that when I compare that to the second plan, that's probably where the GRCA, the slope comes in, going down to the river. Am I correct on that?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
The overall lot, from what I understand from the report, the overall lot is a very huge lot, but a good portion of it to the south is on GRCA floodplain. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yeah, I don't know how much percentage, but yeah, the back part of the lot is it's not on GRCA, possibly on GRCA floodplain, yeah.
It says a GRCA field line.
Sorry?
It's a GRCA field line is what it is.
Yeah.
So that would be correct, Bob, yeah, according to this survey. Okay.
But it's not on GRCA land.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just their fill line. Yeah. Any other questions, comments?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair. I don't want to delay everything. I'm glad to see that this building is finally coming forward for development. It's been sitting there neglected for decades, and I'm glad to see that this is moving ahead.
Me too.
So, Mr. Chair, I will move that this be approved with the conditions, including the GRCA needing a geotechnical assessment. So I will move that this be approved as amended.
Second?
Just a quick comment. Just to echo Mr. McCall's comments, I think this is an excellent application and a great reuse of preservation of a heritage site. So I will second the motion.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now that I know which application we're talking about.
Next application is A 2018-63. Anyone support or opposition, come forward, please. Good morning, Mr. Britton.
Good morning.
You've had an opportunity to review staff's report, recommending approval without conditions.
Yes, and we support the staff report.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I just have a procedural question. I think I have no concerns with the application. I think it's a good use of the lands. I'm just wondering why it wasn't dealt with as a red line to the draft plan.
Just to clarify, the subdivision was draft approved with blocks, and the intent is to register the blocks as lots. And we require the variance in the first instance so that when we go to register the plan of subdivision, we can show the lots. So that's sort of the sequence, rather than the alternative would be we secure the variance now, and then in the future we register the plan and then proceed with the part lot control exemption application. But in discussion with staff, their preference is that we proceed to show the lots in the registered plan in the first instance.
Thank you.
All right. Motion?
Motion, I'll move to approve the application without condition.
Second?
All second.
in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Next application is A 2018-44. Anyone in support or opposition, come forward, please. All right, have you had an opportunity to review staff report?
Yes, I have.
Okay, they're recommending approval with conditions. Do you have any questions or comments? None? You're in agreement with the conditions? Comments, questions?
Just a note through you, Mr. Chair, that there's also the usual region fees.
Yep, that's in the recommendation. Item 13. Anything else?
Hi, just for clarification again for the minutes, the recommendation notes semi-detached dwellings, and the recommendation on the report notes semi-detached dwellings, and it's likely just a clerical error in the fact that it's the front and back of the lot. I just wanted to note for the minutes. Okay.
Well, it's not semi-detached dwellings. Is that what you're, yeah, right. No. Yeah, gotcha. All right. Yep. All right. Any further questions or comments or motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll move that this be approved with the 13 conditions as per the staff report.
All right. Second?
My apologies, Mr. Chair. Can we just have a very brief overview of what the application is? And I have no concerns based on what I see, but I would mind having that explanation in the event.
Can you clarify what you would like to be explained?
Just an overview. Sorry, just an overview of the application. What are you here seeking? What's the proposed result?
Pretty straightforward. No variance is being requested. Complies with all the zoning bylaw. We have a large lot that straddles two streets, as you can see, and we're just cutting it right down the middle. Not asking for any relief.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wanted to also add that the application came to the committee before, and I believe some of the conditions lapsed, and that's why the applicant has to return to the committee. So.
Yes, sorry. It has been approved. Almost all the conditions are ready to be met. We just ran out of time. So.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next application is B 2018-45. Anyone support or opposition, come forward, please. It's actually 45 and 46. It's 603 and 605 Lancaster West. Okay, there's conditions from GRCA and the region as well to get inserted into the recommendation. Have you had an opportunity? Oh, sorry, your name?
Ken Wilson.
Okay, Ken. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report, Ken?
I just was, actually just received a copy of it a moment ago, and I was kind of running through it right now. And,
Okay.
yes.
They're recommending approval with 4 conditions from staff, conditions from GRCA, and conditions from the region. There's also a note here that any future requests to redevelop either property require a matter of the fill encroachment to be resolved. I guess you've encroached into the rear yard with some fill, which will be resolved. It doesn't need to be resolved at this point in time, but it will need to be in the future.
Okay, sorry, I didn't quite follow.
I didn't understand that either. So-
There's a note from environmental in staff's report. At the last sentence of their paragraph says the owners should be advised that any future requests to redevelop either property will require the matter of the fill/encroachment to be resolved. Whatever that specifically pertains to, I don't know, but it's noted in the report. So I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention.
Okay. So that is if we're to do any other...
Not right now, no. It's a note. It's
Okay.
just to be brought to your attention for future reference. So I have no idea what it pertains to.
I'm just having trouble with the echoing in here, understanding
it's
it.
bad in here,
It's-
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure, yeah.
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 Is that better?
It's more of an advisement to the applicant.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. Doesn't need to be dealt with now, but it's just, I just want to make sure that it's brought to your attention because it was noted in the report, that's all.
Okay.
All right. So any further questions or comments?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Can I just have an explanation of how these 2 sites currently operate, and how that compares to what's being proposed?
Sure. Well, we just require, city's requiring a shared driveway easement to be put in there for us to legally operate our business that we have at 605 Lancaster. We of course need to share the driveway to gain access to the back for our parking. So we've been requested by the city to approve that we can have 5 or 6 spots of parking at the back. So they required this easement to allow us to continue with our business.
To continue, so that's why I just wanted to confirm that the site currently functions as a shared driveway.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Questions, comments, motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve applications B 2018-45 and 46, subject to the conditions of the city and the region
And GRCA.
and GRCA.
All right. Second. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Okay, next application is B 2018-47. It's 239 Wellington Street North. Anyone here in support or opposition, come forward. You're the applicant?
Yes, sir.
Are you in? We're support. Your support? Okay. And your opposition or support? Is she opposition or support? Opposition, excuse me. Opposition, can you please sit over on that side, if you don't mind? Thank you.
Is she in support of your application?
Helps us keep it sorted in our minds. We need it, yeah.
Do we want to come down? Oh, okay.
Okay, before we get started, staff has written a report recommending approval with conditions. There's some regional conditions as well that need to be inserted into the recommendation. And have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm here for, my application as well has relapsed, and some of the conditions have not been made, and most of them have, so I had to reapply for a new application, and that's why we're here today again.
All right. Then maybe what we'll do, we'll hear from the opposition at this particular point in time, and
Yeah, the only opposition I may have is if when these properties have houses on them, that they use the rear entrance off of the lane and not be backing onto Wellington Street. Wellington Street, where this home is and where I am as well, is very, very busy. So,
okay, so you wish it to use the laneway for access opposed to the
as opposed to Wellington Street North.
to the front lane.
Yeah, that's my only opposition.
Okay, all right, so it's a traffic issue, maybe we'll let traffic address that. Thanks, Dave.
This is my first hearing of the issue with backing out onto the lane. Is that what the issue is, Mr. Chair?
Want to back onto the lane. I think through you, Mr. Chair, that we would prefer to see the access off of Wellington Street. We have many driveways that back onto Wellington and people reverse it onto Wellington Street. This would be no different. And I'm not sure if this has come through site plan or not. Has it come through site plan? Has it come through site plan? It won't have to. Okay.
Just as a comment, when I'm trying to get onto Wellington Street from my driveway, oftentimes cars will stop and let my husband go through just so we can get onto Wellington Street.
Mr. Chair, if it may assist, we did have some conversations with the applicant about where parking would be provided on this site, and I believe it is their intention to provide a parking pad in the rear with access to the lane, and perhaps the applicant could clarify what their intentions are.
We will have parking from the laneway in the back. There will be 2 driveways in the front of the proposed buildings, but there will be parking from the back. That's where we have suggested that we would put our parking lot back there and that they would go through the laneway. Only 2 spots will be in the front, so just like any other residential home.
All right, so then that would minimize the access off of Wellington that way then. Okay.
I'm not sure what you said.
They're proposing parking in the rear.
Right.
They will have access or a driveway in the front as a real practice, but they're proposing that the majority of the use will be off of the access or parking in the rear.
Well, I hope the police department gets a hold of the address and everybody will come and get hit. I'm sorry, that's my thought, my feeling, is that this will cause car accidents. So, it's just because right now, there was just a traffic counter on our road. I don't know what that resulted in, but since the bridge on Victoria Street is out, our place is like a highway, all at the designated times of the day. There is no parking on the side of the street that the homes are going to be built on. I understand that, but I'm just thinking of people's safety in the future.
Okay, all right, thanks. It's duly noted for my colleagues on the panel. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, ma'am, were you at the last hearing for this matter?
Yes, I was.
You were. And the same concerns were expressed at that time?
Right. And it was also, as far as I understand, that they weren't going to be any driving onto Wellington Street. It was all going to be through the lane at the back.
It was, at that time, your understanding was it was all going to be through the lane?
That's what I thought.
Okay. I think, Mr. Chair, I've said this a few times, and I remain tenacious about it. I think there should be a site plan for something like this, showing us how the site intends to operate. I would like to see where the parking is being proposed. If you're going to sever this lot, we need to understand how it's going to function. And if you're proposing to have parking off the laneway, we should see where it's going to be and be able to have drawings in front of us and be able to assure the other residents that, in fact, what you're proposing is to have those parking spaces off the rear. Simply saying that today is, I'm not sure it's sufficient.
And we have supported that. We have given the plans to the city, to the planning department already, supporting our parking in the back. So,
can we see those plans?
Mr. Chair, if it's of assistance, I might be able to provide a little bit of background. As a condition of the previous approval, there was a requirement for a site drawing as well as the elevation plans, and it was through that review that all of those plans were provided to the city. That approval has lapsed, so we've proposed to put the same condition into this approval, condition 3. If the Committee of Adjustment were to approve the recommendation, the same review would be undertaken by staff, and those plans and drawings would be resubmitted to the city under this application.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would this site typically, is this a severance and the creation of 2 dwellings typically subject to, is it covered by the site plan control bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, it is not.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I continue to have concerns with not having those drawings. I appreciate that this is a renewal of an existing application, and to be consistent, I'm happy to support staff's position, or excuse me, to support refreshing this application, reapproving it. However, in the future, I think we need to see the site plans. The site plans need to come with the application so that we can assess how the site's going to function and assure the people who come before us that what is being proposed is as is shown on those drawings.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you're in support of this application, but for future applications, you want to see the site plan. Okay, so is that a motion to approve?
It wasn't a motion, but I'll make the motion.
All right.
I'll move to approve application B 2018-47.
And with the inclusion of Regent's conditions. All right, second.
Mr. Chair, I'll second that with a comment that I agree with my colleague, especially seeing that these, I'm not going to call them official site plans, but drawings indicating where the parking is supposed to be and access is supposed to be. If the city has that in their possession, it would have been beneficial to include it in the report. But I will second the motion, Mr. Chair, as it stands.
All right, all in favor, carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is B 2018-48 to B 2018-50. Anyone support or opposition? It's a recommendation for deferral.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Scott Patterson with LaBreche Patterson and Associates.
Good morning, Scott. Staff's recommending deferral on these applications. You're in agreement with the deferral?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
For committee's knowledge, we resubmitted the applications last week, so the revised applications will be coming for our committee hopefully next month.
Okay.
But yeah, we're full agreement with the deferral recommendation.
Okay, so we defer to the next Committee of Adjustment meeting. All right, that's the motion. Second, Bob, all in favor, carried. Thank you. Yeah. Next application is B 2018-51 and B 2018-64. Support or opposition, come forward, please. Good morning, Scott. Let me see here. There's region conditions for this as well that need to be inserted in the recommendation. Once again, have you had a chance to review staff report, Scott?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we've had a chance to review the staff report. If committee would choose to support this application, I would just request a minor modification to condition number 4A. And condition 4A requires a building code assessment, but there's no mention that that code assessment should be done strictly on the basis of the new building. The wording would make it seem that we'd have to review existing buildings, which we have no control over. So any modification should be done just based on the new building. Or the assessment, sorry, should be done on the new building.
Just at the end, it's just basically based on the new construction. Staff?
I'm just reluctant to change any of the wording because I'm not the expert in the matters pertaining to the building code. My understanding is just that the intent is to ensure that there is no building code issue with respect to fire separation and what have you. I think that it's in the city's best interest to ensure that any new development would satisfy that. I don't believe that the intent is for this condition to be onerous to the applicant. I think it's just to ensure safety because it is an infill situation and the lot is somewhat narrow, situated between two existing buildings that are older buildings.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Essentially, there's a shed or something that's going to be torn down, correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there's an existing shed.
And there's an existing building that's going to be retained and a new building built on the severed lot. So, I think the way that it's written, I can't see where it would propose you a problem. I really don't think it would. We'll just leave it as it is. So anyone have questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, through you, I'm inclined to agree with staff as well. I'm not a building inspector, but I think it's a safety issue due to the proximity of other buildings. And I agree with you, Mr. Chair. I don't think it's terribly onerous, but I think the condition 3A, 4A, I think is appropriate for this project to move forward. So, Mr. Chair, I will approve, or I will make a motion for the severances and the variance. There are no conditions on the variance, and there's the 11 conditions on the severance. And you mentioned there was some region stuff too? Yeah.
Yeah.
So adding the region requirements, I move that this be approved.
All right. Second?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next applications are 2018-52, 2018-65, 66, 2018-53, 67, and 68. Anyone support or opposition, come forward. Once again, there's some regional conditions that need to be inserted in along with staff's recommendations and conditions. You had an opportunity to review staff report?
I have.
Do you have any questions or comments?
I'm happy with it.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, can we have an overview of the proposed application? What's being requested?
Of course. About 6 months ago or so, we already received approval to sever the lot. It's
The two lots together are about 100 feet wide. They were, at that time, about a 45 and a 65, so we did a severance to make them even, 50 and 50. Zoning is correct for what we're proposing, which are to build 4 semi-detached units, so 2 buildings, 4 units. We've been working with the city. We've greatly revised our original plans so that it's in line with the neighborhood. We've gone over and above with some additional tree cutting, even past what was approved, to keep the neighbors happy based on the request of Sandro at the city. Now we're at the point where we're applying to further several lots into 4, so that when we build the 2 buildings, each will have their own address. We also are 0.1 of a meter over for each building. The reason behind that is I met with the engineering department, and I had a concern regarding being able to drain using gravity as opposed to sewage ejectors for the basement floor drains or the basement washroom that we want to put in there. So in discussions with them, we could have made it easier here and raised the buildings, but because we had those concerns about the height of the sewers and whatnot at the street level, that's the reason for that 0.1, which it is my understanding the city seems to have no issue with. The only other, we kept the setbacks in the back and the front on the sides the way the city requires, and so the only other variance has to do with the size of the actual building on the size of the lot. My comments with that is there's already an existing semi-detached development right next door that was done a few years back, and we're pretty much the identical size, the footprint as them. So we're really not asking for anything out of the ordinary. It's in keeping with the neighborhood. In my eyes and in my understanding is with Brian, the planner, and Sandro, the designer. They support the application, and that's pretty much an overview of it.
Okay. Questions, comments, motion?
Mr. Chair, maybe I'm missing something here, and maybe staff or the applicant can clarify it for me. It's a severance with 2 buildings going to go on each property, or 1 building, a duplex on each?
Not a duplex.
Semi-detached.
Semi-detached. And then split. So there's going to be a semi-detached on the severed land and a semi-detached on the retained land for a total of 4 dwelling units?
2 buildings, 4 dwelling units, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. It was late at night last night when I was reading this one. There is a letter from an adjacent neighbor requesting that there be an 8-foot fence along the rear property line, I believe. Is that something, through you, Mr. Chair, question to staff, is that something that we can actually request at this point?
If I can make a comment on that?
Actually, my question is to staff to see if they can.
Sorry, I have not seen the comments from the resident. I'm not Brian.
They'd like to see a fence built along the rear property.
They want a fence. Is that what I'm understanding? I don't know whether you have the authority to require a fence.
That's my question. Maybe, Mr. Chair, with your great experience, you can enlighten us here. Can we?
It is my understanding that there's no authority for this committee to impose a condition like installing a fence. Typically, when we have site plan control areas, fences are installed between different uses. Semi-detached uses are uses that are permitted in this zone and wouldn't typically require the construction of a fence between it and a single detached home, for instance, or it's not typically required. I think it's up to the individual property owner.
Yeah,
Thank you, Julianne. That does clarify my understanding of the situation as well. I guess maybe through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicant, is this something you would consider doing on your own accord as opposed to being required by this committee to, so you're amenable to putting in a fence?
So I'm glad you brought this up, and I came well prepared to address this specific item. In terms of appeasing the neighbors, we've been in communication with all the neighbors the entire process. In terms of appeasing specific neighbors, even after the tree removal happened based on the approved arborist plan we had, we went back and paid better part of $1,000 to remove an additional tree to appease one of the neighbors already. In terms of this fence, I brought 3 pictures I'd like, if it's all right, to send over to you. I spoke with this neighbor, and there's a few items related to this. Number one, there's an existing chain link fence that looks like it's maybe less than 3 years old that's already in place. So in terms of marking the boundary of the property. In addition to that, to visually separate the 2 properties, based on my work with Sandro, who's the urban designer, we left many tall trees in the back of the property in place so that there's a visual barrier. In addition to that item, on the side of the neighbor who's making this request, he has a whole row of fir trees. So we've got a fence, we've got fir trees on the low side, and we've got tall trees on the tall side. I don't know how many more barriers this guy wants. And I told him, I said, listen, if the committee requests me to put in a fence, I will. But based on my conversations with the city and the city staff, we do not in any way see this as a requirement or that we're negatively impacting that neighbor. So my personal opinion is, I'm happy to appease the other neighbors as we have, and we've demonstrated that over and above what was required. But for this particular case, I think if I can call a spade, I think it's a bit of a, well, I'll support you so long as you put in a fence for me. So I'm not inclined to put in a new fence in place of what's already there.
Mr. Chair, through you, thanks to the applicant for giving a further clarification on this. Seeing as I don't think we have, or historically have not, made a requirement of fencing between similarly zoned properties and usage of properties, and in light of the fact that there is a fair degree of visual screening, as shown in the photographs provided by the applicant, I'm going to move that this be approved with the conditions, not including the request from the neighbor for a fence, and the regional conditions.
Mr. Chair, as a general comment, I am quite confident that we have the authority to impose conditions that are such as a fence, as long as it's either fully on the applicant's property, or there's some sort of requirement that there be an agreement reached to encroach on the neighboring property. As long as the condition is reasonably related to the development, we have the authority to impose that condition. However, in this case, that's my opinion. In this case, I don't see a need to require a fence. It can be installed, a privacy fence can be installed in normal course as between neighbors on the property line once the homeowners are there. So I support the motion and will second it.
Just a quick comment. Thanks for bringing us up to speed on that. That may come in handy on other applications down the road.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application is B 2018-54 and A 2018-69. Anyone here support or opposition? Come forward, please. Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Your name?
Boban Jokanovic.
Goran, once again, there's regional conditions to insert along with the conditions from the city. Have you had an opportunity to review staff's report?
Yes, I have.
And do you have any questions or
straightforward
comments?
been through this,
Straightforward.
yes.
Questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, can I ask for an overview of the application, please?
Yes, basically there's an existing house located on a lot that's frontage 47 feet wide. My client or the owner would like to demolish the existing house, which is fairly old. He would like to split the lot in two and build the semi-detached. Requirement for semi-detached is that it's to be built on a lot that's minimum 25 feet wide, leaving us short for one side. Hence, we applied for this minor variance.
Do you expect there'll be any variances required for the proposed semi-detached units?
I'm sorry, I have trouble hearing you. Can you repeat the question?
Do you expect that there'll be any variances required? Do you have a concept plan for your semi-detached dwellings?
Yes, we do have a concept.
And do you expect that any variances will be required for those?
Not other than whatever we requested here, just a relief for the width of the lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything further? Any further questions, comments, motion? Yep. Region conditions to insert into this. No. There's 3 conditions. Yep. No, 2 conditions.
Mr. Chair, I think this is fairly straightforward. I will approve or move to approve that the severance be approved and that the minor variance for the lot width also be approved as per the 13 conditions in the staff report and the supplementary region conditions.
Second? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn. First, second, all in favor? Carried.